Very pleased to take you to the UK for a conversation with Stephen Don. He has written a book called All Things Must Pass, a really intriguing novel. Stephen, thanks for jumping on.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
Tell me about the road to writing this book. How'd this come about?
Yeah, it's an interesting story. Back in about 2002 or so, I went to see this film called Identity, and it's actually still one of my favorite films. And I came away thinking I could write something about a really troubled guy, but he has like 6 or 7 identities. And so I wrote a section, about 10,000 words, and then I found that I just couldn't continue it, and the idea lapsed. And then in the intervening period, I'm an actor and a screenwriter, and I have done a lot of work writing screenplays. Only a few of which have been made into films, but that's the movie business. But it gave me a discipline, and I got this one section of about 10,000 words. I got it printed by myself, and then I showed this little handbook to a couple of friends of mine, and they absolutely loved it. And one of them said, it'd be great if you could develop that into a full-length novel. And now this is 2019, so 2020. So this is a good 15 years after I wrote that first section, and I hadn't thought about that. But it was their response that made me think, yeah, you know what, I'm gonna go ahead and do that. And the discipline that I'd actually got from writing screenplays, the important thing about screenplay is structure. You can't have scenes that go nowhere. You can't have dialogue that doesn't mean anything. So I wasn't afraid to sort of sit down at the white paper and carry the story on of Martin Wilson, this wild young man who lives in a fantasy world, a fantasy world dominated by Bruce Lee, samurai warriors, swords, knives. I mean, he really is a mixed-up kid, and quite disturbed. And in fact, the friend of mine, his name is Nick, and he was the one who suggested I continue the story into a novel. He actually hated the character at the beginning, and it wasn't until a bit later that as the story went on, that he saw that this character Martin was actually just living in his head. That it was all fantasy, really. And what I wanted to do in the novel was to look at a young man and show his kind of development. I wanted to see, if you like, the real Martin Wilson struggling to come out, because I think that especially with young men, there's a great thing that you want to show that you're tough. You want to show that you're strong. You want to show that you're a man. And so, there's a great, I go to a gym, and I see a lot of young guys sort of, posing and sort of, showing their pecs and their whatever, showing their muscles. And that's the front. That's the front that a lot of men put up. And I wanted to sort of show that that there's a more sensitive and fragile person behind that front. I also wanted to have a tale of redemption. I think that it's interesting to have a story that's full of violence and a violent image. It hooks the reader in, but in a way it lacks depth. And to get that depth, you have to sort of show that someone is moving on in their lives as we move on in our lives. So it's a tale of redemption, and of course, what he's redeemed by is love and suffering. And the title, "All Things Must Pass," is actually like a mantra from Buddhism, and it comes from an encounter in later on in the novel, where Martin finds this down and out guy and he brings him in for a coffee. And the down and out guy turns out to be an old rock musician who has lost everything. His wife and kids died in a fire, and he sort of, fell through the gaps in life. But he's actually not unhappy. And what he says to Martin as he goes out of the cafe and sort of waves goodbye to Martin, he says, "All things must pass." So you can grow and you can develop and you can overcome the difficulties in your life. Now, the novel is written in a first-person interior monologue. That means, so I plunge the reader into the maelstrom of the fantasies and emotions that rage through this young man. And if I may, I'd like to read a short section from the first part of the novel, because this is where Martin is very, very angry. He's seen a beautiful samurai sword in an antique shop in Chelsea, in London, but he is humiliated by the owners, and he wants to get revenge. So he imagines that he becomes a rhinoceros, and he calls one of the owners Bow Tie because the guy has a bow tie, and the other he knows as Mr. Wilkins. And I'd just like to read this short section, because it gives you a real feel of the energy of the novel. And I'm going to put on a slightly different accent because Martin, I think, is working class and he's from London. So I'm going to sort of do my best to give you a kind of Adrian Brody sort of feel here. All right. So here we go. I get inside the skin of some weird animal, like a rhinoceros, with a great big horn sticking out of my forehead. I could do some damage with that, all right. Take that antique shop for a start. I'd stand snorting through my nostrils, glaring at the window display with its loveliest of swords. And then I'd begin to paw the ground with one of my front hoofs, sort of working myself up into the right mood for a charge. I can just imagine what old Bowtie would be saying over the counter to Wilkins. "Mr. Wilkins," he'd say, "I may have overdone it with the sherry at lunchtime, but unless my eyes are deceiving me, there would appear to be a rhinoceros out in the street opposite our display window." I'm not so sure what Wilkins would say in response. In fact, I don't think he'd say anything at all, being a man of action and few words. He would move from the back of the shop to the display window, perhaps giving Bowtie a certain look as he draws level with him. Any exchange between them would be done with the eyebrows. But one thing is certain, that as soon as Wilkins looks out through the window, he sees me and he recognizes the danger at once. And I feel on pretty safe ground when I say that he would say something to Bowtie at this juncture along the lines, "Yes, that is a rhinoceros. And if I know my rhinoceroses, he looks to be in a bit of a mood." "A bit of a mood, Mr. Wilkins? Pray elucidate, do." But Wilkins is wiser than Bowtie, because he knows this is not the time to stand around and chat. So with no further ado, he turns on his heels and heads back into the murky gloom that is his habitual abode at the rear of the shop. "Whatever are you doing, Mr. Wilkins?" There is something in Bowtie's voice to suggest that an element of panic has overtaken him. But Mr. Wilkins is calm itself, and without looking back at Bowtie, he shouts over his shoulder, "I'm getting a gun, sir." "Ah, capital idea, Wilkins. If I might make a suggestion, sir," says Wilkins, "I would remove my person from the vicinity of the window. But it is sage advice given too late, for I have started my run, and before I even smash into the plate glass of the display window, I have set things vibrating and shaking on shelves and counters. I have set the bell above the shop door jangling, all of which sets Bowtie quaking and roots him to the spot. And when I hit that display window, why, you'd swear a bomb had gone off."
Wow. I'm just thinking of that rhinoceros. You painted a wonderful picture and the reaction to it as well, which everybody will get if they read the book. All Things Must Pass, Stephen Don's book, of course, on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. What do you hope people take away from reading your novel?
What will they take away from it? I think they'll. I suppose my target audience, although the two friends who read it, one was 80 and the other was about early 50s. But I think my target audience would be more it's from about 15 to 35. It's not a young adult book, but I think it has a lot to say to people who themselves are developing. I think it's a sort of yes, you get hooked by the violence, but I think there's a lot of stuff there that we all go through. That that we all have a mother, and for most of us, that mother dies before we die, and it causes us a lot of pain, and we get lost. And I think that's the thing about this book, is that it shows a character who is lost, and I think that people will find some of it funny, maybe sometimes a bit unnerving, but I also think that they'll see themselves at times, and maybe not so much in the way that the character is at the beginning, but in what happens to him and how he reflects on things. I think there's a lot there.
Well, it was wonderful to speak with you, Stephen Don. All Things Must Pass. As I said, you can get it on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. It's been very nice. Thank you. Thank you.